Hi. I recently had an occasion to visit the Cambridge Co-op where I used to live, and was reminded of the following tale from way back when I was there. 1981, the winter of 1981, Gail and I had returned from their 5th year of retailing in Bar Harbor to our co-op, which was a 3-story building, and we shared with 11 other people, 13 of us altogether, half of which roughly were over 30 or a little older, and half were below that. Particularly in those days, in 1981, we had two freshmen that we called the girls, both freshmen BU. Liz was from Long Island, figured she knew everything, and Ellen was from a very quiet gal from a horsey suburb in Boston, who almost never left Liz's side because she also thought that Liz knew about everything that was worth knowing. Anyhow, one night in late winter, early spring, a bunch of the old heads were sitting around watching Mary Hartman in the TV room. The girls stuck their heads in and asked if we wanted to go with them to, if anybody wanted to go to the last call at Sullivan's down at the end of the block. Nobody wanted to leave, but just as the girls were turning to go, it occurred to me off the top of my head to say, be very, very careful down there that you don't get in any Q and Z. So Liz sticks her head back in the door and says, Q and Z? What's that? And I said, well, it's hard to explain, and I'm not sure I don't want to bore the people here, but all I can tell you is that a couple of years ago, one of the young women from the house got involved with the Q and Z of those guys down there throwing darts. And the next thing we knew, a couple of nights later, she packed her suitcase and left and never saw her again. Didn't even know where to send her books and papers, so be careful. So then Ellen says, but you got to tell us a little bit about Q and Z. And I said, oh, Liz will tell you about it, but you better hurry up, you'll miss last call. Next morning, Gail is down in the breakfast room, kitchen, and the girls come up to her and ask her about Q and Z. Can she explain it? She thinks for a second, smacks her hand on the table, and she says, this is all I want to say about Q and Z. When Paul and I were first together, he wanted to do some Q and Z, and I said, you know, I went to art school and I'm pretty liberal, but there's got to be certain limits in any relationship, and this is going to be the limit. And then Gail gets up and leaves the kitchen. Later that day, Stellan catches me reading a newspaper in the corner of the living room. Stellan was a Swedish-born, well-educated, sexually liberated physicist grad student, and he gets me over and he says, kind of embarrassedly, says, you know, the girl's been asking me about Q and Z, and I thought I knew all about it, and I started to describe some things, and Liz said, no, that's S&M. And so I tried again. She said, no, that's B and D. And I realized I didn't know much about Q and Z, so it'd really make me feel a lot better if you could tell me so I could tell them. So I say, well, Stellan, you know, I grew up in a Methodist parsonage, so I have to admit I never really had any direct experience with Q and Z, and I probably only really have a rough understanding of it from outside. What I do know is it's the most complicated things that humans have ever gotten involved with, much more so than S&M and B and D, and even so much so that one partner can be engaged in Q and Z and the other partner not even realize it. So what you should do, what I've always thought I would do, maybe you should do it, is take your library card, go to the main Harvard library, go to the reference room, and ask to see the unlisted references on Q and Z. Now, they'll probably deny that they have unlisted references on Q and Z. They have to do that because they don't want rich alumni getting turned off to think that, you know, the Harvard library has Q and Z materials. So probably the best thing to do is pick a name of a professor who teaches abnormal psych. Go in there armed with that and say, you know, mention the professor's name, say that you're writing a term paper on Q and Z, and you really have a need and a right to see the Q and Z references. And if the kid at the desk says no, they don't have them, then demand to see the head reference person. So I send Stellan off to this. Well, there were questions going around the house, and for several nights at dinner, the the girls in particular and other younger members of the house were trying to sitting and squirming and turning red and wanting to ask questions but not quite sure what. We kept turning them off. Finally, things were beginning to die down, and even the youngest members of the house began to suspect it was a put on, maybe. So Gail and I decided we came up with a plan to give it a boost. What we needed was a shtick. What is the shtick associated with Q&Z? So we lay around in bed that night. We were thinking balloons, now balloons, too comical. Candles, B&D maybe, but not for Q&Z. So finally we come up with our shtick, and we take out an ad in the real paper, which in those days was mostly of interest because everybody liked to read the personals in it. So when the real paper comes out, I circle our ad, put it out on the coffee table, and sure enough, just about the time everybody's gotten to the dinner table, one of the guys spots the ad, brings it over, and with great glee and excitement, he reads the following: SWF, that's a straight white female, SWF 21 wishes to find a gentle guru for experimenting with Q&Z. Please, no tyros, and proper wicks a must. Respond to real box 56, which was a fine. Well, that immediately got everybody into a furor again. I could see that Liz was not only blushing but beginning to sweat up around her hairline, and we had a lot of fun that night. Anyhow, within a couple of days it all died down somewhat again, so we had a second ad come out which read Romanian, pardon my English, Romanian gymnast, very flexible, wishes to continue Q&Z habit begun at home. Prefer Romanian but not important. And again, box 56. Well, that got a lot of giggles, but the lid is basically off. So our third ad is going to read, only U.S. supplier of imported French Q&Z wicks. Send $15 for a representative sample, and then this time read a real box number, and then we would have trimmed random lengths of fancy cords, braids, and the like, put it in a tie box, mailed it off, and let people figure out whether they had real Q&Z wicks or not. But unfortunately or fortunately for this little piece of mail fraud, Gail and I had to come back and start selling trinkets to tourists again. It was already late spring, so it never happened.